9:47 in the evening, March 12, 2014. Highway 73 cuts through Columbus, Georgia. Pine trees, abandoned strip malls, nothing else. Officer Daniel Markham's patrol car sits 30 yards behind a silver Honda Accord. Blue lights pulse across everything. Dispatch crackles about a domestic disturbance 3 miles south. Markham ignores it. He approaches the driver's window with the casual confidence of someone who's done this 400 times. His right hand rests on his weapon, not gripping, just 2 fingers on the grip. The driver is Marcus Webb, 28, elementary school teacher. Window already down, both hands on the wheel, registration and insurance on the dashboard, license in his left palm, interior light on without being asked. Every signal says, "I'm cooperating." Evening, Markham says, "License and registration." Webb hands them over without speaking. This is the kind of compliance that usually ends in 90 seconds, a warning, maybe a ticket. But tonight becomes case file 2417. Tonight costs the Columbus Police Department $125,000. Tonight changes the training protocol for every officer in Muskogee County. Markham takes the documents back to his vehicle. The bodycam shows him running Webb's information, but his eyes keep drifting to the rearview mirror, not looking at Webb, looking at the passenger seat. A figure sits there, barely visible in the blue light. Male, mid-30s, black hoodie, jeans. The passenger hasn't moved since the stop began. Hasn't turned his head, reached for anything, shifted his weight. This bothers Markham in a way he'll struggle to articulate later. The computer returns clean results. No warrants, no flags, no priors. 3 speeding tickets over a decade, all paid. Insurance current. Registration good for 7 more months. There's no legal reason to extend this stop. But Markham sits in his patrol car for 2 minutes and 17 seconds. The bodycam picks up his breathing. Deep inhales through the nose, exhaled through barely parted lips, the breathing pattern of someone making a decision. When he returns to the Honda, everything has changed. The casual confidence has hardened into something aggressive. Shoulders squared, his hand now grips the weapon. He leans down but doesn't hand back the documents. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Webb's face registers confusion for 1.5 seconds, then he catches himself. "Is there a problem, officer? I need you to step out of the vehicle. Just louder this time." Webb complies slowly, narrating each action. "I'm unbuckling my seatbelt now. I'm opening the door. I'm stepping out." The verbal choreography of someone who's studied their rights, someone who's watched too many traffic stop videos, someone who knows survival sometimes depends on narrating your own compliance. But Markham isn't focused on Webb anymore. He's looking past him, through the open door, directly at the passenger who still hasn't moved. The dashboard camera captures this moment perfectly. Markham's face in the dome light, pupils dilated, jaw muscles flexing once, twice, 3 times. "You," Markham calls into the vehicle. "Passenger, let me see your hands." The passenger's hands are already visible on his thighs. But he doesn't acknowledge the command, doesn't turn his head, doesn't speak. 5 seconds of silence. "Passenger, I need to see identification right now." Markham's voice has climbed half an octave. "This is the moment, the invisible line." The passenger is Special Agent Victor Chen of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Chen knows something Markham doesn't understand yet. In the United States, passengers have 0 legal obligation to identify themselves during traffic stops, unless the officer has reasonable suspicion that the passenger has committed, is committing, or will commit a crime. Chen also knows that remaining silent isn't reasonable suspicion. Matching a vague description isn't reasonable suspicion. Making a cop uncomfortable isn't reasonable suspicion. So Chen doesn't move, doesn't speak, doesn't comply. "Sir, this is your final warning." Markham's hand fully grips his weapon now, though he hasn't drawn it. "Show me your identification or you will be detained." The bodycam shows Webb standing beside his vehicle, hands still raised, head turning between the officer and his passenger. His mouth opens twice as if to speak, then closes. "What did you say when you watched something illegal happen in real time?" Chen finally moves. He turns his head exactly 15 degrees, makes eye contact with Markham through the open door, expression completely neutral. When he speaks, his voice is quiet. The bodycam barely captures it. "I do not consent to any searches. I am exercising my Fourth Amendment right to remain silent. Am I being detained?" 21 words, a legal incantation establishing knowledge of rights, showing lack of consent, demanding clarification of legal status. Precisely what civil rights attorneys teach citizens to say. They make Markham furious. Get out of the vehicle right now. Markham's free hand moves to his radio. I need backup on Highway 73, mile marker 42. Traffic stop, uncooperative passenger. The radio crackles back within seconds. Copy that, Unit 17. Backup en route, ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes. In the Bodycam footage, you can watch Markham's brain working through options. 4 minutes is too long to stand here in a stalemate, too long to look weak, too long to maintain the adrenaline currently flooding his system, demanding action right now. So Markham makes his choice. He reaches past Webb, grabs the passenger door handle, yanks it open. Chen doesn't resist, but he doesn't assist either. He remains seated, hands visible, eyes forward. Markham's bodycam shows his own hands entering frame. They reach for Chen's arm. This is where everything goes wrong. Chen does not pull away, he does not fight back. He simply allows his body to become dead weight. Markham gets a grip on Chen's left bicep and pulls. Chen's upper body tilts toward the door frame, but his lower body remains anchored in the seat. His right hand maintains contact with his thigh while his left arm extends limply in Markham's grip. This is passive resistance, a technique taught in civil rights training. The body neither assists nor actively fights the removal. It makes the officer do all the work while the subject commits no aggressive action. It enrages Markham. Get out of the car, he pulls harder, using both hands now on Chen's arm. Chen's shoulder twists at an angle that looks painful, but Chen's expression doesn't change. His breathing remains steady and audible on the bodycam audio. Webb's voice cuts through, high and panicked. He's not fighting you, he's not. Shut up, Markham doesn't look away from Chen. Get back in your vehicle. Webb doesn't move, the bodycam shows him frozen in place, one hand slightly raised as if to intervene, then slowly lowering it. His mouth forms words that don't come out. Markham releases Chen's left arm and reaches across with his right hand, grabbing Chen's right arm instead. He attempts to pull Chen sideways out of the vehicle using a different angle. Chen's body pivots at the waist, but his legs remain in the footwell. His head comes close to striking the door frame, but doesn't make contact. I am not resisting, Chen says. His voice is calm, almost clinical. I am invoking my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Am I free to go? The question is legally precise. If Chen is not free to go, he is detained and Markham must articulate reasonable suspicion. If Chen is free to go, Markham must release him immediately. The question forces a decision. Markham makes it. He releases Chen's arms, steps back slightly, and his right hand moves to his duty belt, not to the weapon, to the handcuffs. He pulls them free with a practiced motion that suggests hundreds of previous arrests. You are being detained for failure to identify. This is the first explicit legal justification Markham has offered. It is also completely wrong. Georgia law allows officers to demand identification from drivers, but not from passengers unless reasonable suspicion exists. Chen's failure to identify himself is not itself a crime. Chen knows this. Under what legal authority? Markham doesn't answer. He reaches for Chen's left wrist. Chen pulls his arm away, not aggressively, just moving it out of reach. The movement is calm and controlled. This is the moment that will appear in legal briefs, marked as Exhibit 7. Markham interprets the movement as active resistance. His entire demeanor shifts from frustrated to aggressive. He grabs Chen's left wrist with both hands and yanks it forward hard enough that Chen's entire upper body comes out of the vehicle involuntarily. Chen's head clears the door frame by perhaps 2 inches. Then Markham twists the wrist inward while simultaneously pushing Chen's elbow up. The joint manipulation is a compliance technique designed to cause pain without permanent injury. Chen gasps, the first sign of physical distress captured on the recording, but does not cry out. Hands behind your back. Chen's right hand moves voluntarily behind him. His left arm is already pinned at an angle that makes voluntary movement difficult. Markham maintains the joint lock while fumbling for his handcuffs one-handed. The process takes 12 seconds that feel much longer on the recording. The first cuff ratchets closed around Chen's left wrist. The sound is distinct on the bodycam audio, sharp metallic clicks as each notch engages. Markham releases the joint lock and grabs Chen's right wrist. Chen doesn't resist. The second cuff closes. Markham tightens both cuffs 3 additional clicks each, bringing them into the range that defense attorneys will later describe as unreasonably tight based on Chen's circulation complaints documented 90 minutes later. Stay there, Markham commands, though Chen has nowhere to go. His hands are cuffed behind his back while his lower body remains seated in the vehicle. Markham steps back, breathing hard. The bodycam captures his face in profile. His jaw is still clenched. His free hand flexes twice before moving back to his duty belt. Webb is still standing beside the Honda. What did he do? His voice cracks on the last word. Markham ignores him. He keys his radio. Unit 17, update. 1 passenger detained, awaiting backup for transport. The radio response is immediate. Copy that, Unit 17, backup 2 minutes out. 2 minutes becomes 4, then 6, then 8. During this time, Chen remains partially in the vehicle with his hands cuffed behind his back. The position forces his shoulders forward at an uncomfortable angle. The bodycam shows him shifting his weight occasionally but not speaking. Markham stands 3 feet away, occasionally glancing at Chen but mostly watching the highway. Waiting for backup he called but doesn't strictly need. The detention has already occurred. The arrest has already been made, if it can be called an arrest without charges. What Markham is really waiting for is validation. The presence of another officer who will see the detained passenger and confirm, through their participation, that this was a reasonable response to an unclear threat. At the 9-minute mark of Chen's detention, a second patrol car pulls up. Officer Rodriguez, the bodycam captures their brief conversation. "What do you got?" Rodriguez asks. Uncooperative passenger, refused to identify, resisted removal from vehicle. This is the first time Markham has characterized Chen's actions as resistance. In the previous radio call, he said uncooperative. The escalation in language happens naturally, almost unconsciously. The narrative is already being constructed. Rodriguez approaches the Honda. He looks at Chen, still half-seated with hands cuffed behind his back. "You want him in my unit?" "Yeah, I'll finish with the driver." Rodriguez reaches for Chen's upper arm. "Come on, buddy, let's go." Chen speaks for the first time in 9 minutes. "I would like to speak with an attorney." Rodriguez glances at Markham, who shrugs. He's been like this the whole time. "Like what?" Chen asks. Neither officer answers. Rodriguez guides Chen out of the vehicle, properly this time, supporting his weight rather than pulling. Once Chen is standing, Rodriguez does a quick pat-down search. He finds Chen's wallet in the right front pocket. He opens it. The FBI credentials are in the first visible slot. Rodriguez stops moving. He stares at the credentials for 2 seconds, then looks up at Markham. His expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his posture. He's FBI. The bodycam captures the moment perfectly. Markham's face goes through 3 distinct stages: confusion, then recognition, then something that might be panic or might be anger. It's difficult to tell which emotion wins. "He didn't identify himself," Markham says. "There's a defensive edge now." "He didn't have to," Rodriguez says quietly. "He's a passenger." The silence that follows lasts 6 seconds. Cars pass on the highway. Wind rustles through pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Chen breaks the silence. "I would like those cuffs removed, please." Rodriguez looks at Markham. Markham looks at the ground. Then Markham moves forward and unlocks the handcuffs. He does it without speaking, without making eye contact. Chen rolls his shoulders once, twice. He accepts his credentials back from Rodriguez. Then he looks directly at Markham. "What's your badge number?" Markham's face hardens again. 437. "Thank you." Chen returns to the vehicle and closes the passenger door. Markham walks back to Webb, who has been standing beside his car for 14 minutes now. He hands back the license and registration without speaking. "You're free to go." No ticket, no warning, just the return of documents and a command that carries the weight of ending something that should never have started. Webb gets in his car. His hands shake as he starts the engine. The bodycam captures his face through the windshield one last time before he drives away. He looks exhausted. The patrol cars sit on the shoulder for another 3 minutes. Then Rodriguez approaches Markham's vehicle. "You need to report this." "Report what?" "You know what." Markham's jaw clenches again. He refused to comply with a lawful order. There was no lawful order. He's a passenger. He doesn't have to identify unless you've got reasonable suspicion, and you didn't. He matched the description. What description? Markham doesn't answer. Rodriguez shakes his head. Document it however you want, but that FBI agent has his own recording, and it's going to show something different than whatever you write in your report. This is the first mention of Chen recording the encounter. The Bodycam footage doesn't show a phone or recording device, but Rodriguez assumes correctly that federal agents document civil rights violations. The assumption will prove accurate. The patrol cars separate. Markham returns to his district. Rodriguez returns to his. The highway goes quiet again except for passing traffic. Inside the Honda, Chen and Webb drive in silence for 2 miles before Webb speaks. I'm sorry. For what? I don't know, for not doing something. There wasn't anything to do, Chen says. You couldn't stop it. You were smart to comply. Are you really FBI? Yes. What happens now? Chen looks out the window at the pine trees passing in darkness. Now I file a complaint, then we see if anyone cares. The recording ends there, but the case file is just beginning. The formal complaint arrives at the Columbus Police Department's Internal Affairs Division on March 17, 2014, 5 days after the traffic stop. It comes not from Agent Chen directly, but from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, which handles civil rights violations involving federal agents. The complaint is 3 pages, single-spaced, with 14 attached exhibits including bodycam footage from Markham's camera, dashboard camera footage from Markham's vehicle, audio recording from Chen's phone which was recording in his pocket the entire time, photographs of Chen's wrists showing bruising and linear marks from the handcuffs, medical documentation from Chen's visit to urgent care 2 hours after the stop, and legal analysis from the FBI's Civil Rights Unit explaining why passenger identification cannot be compelled without reasonable suspicion. Internal Affairs Lieutenant Sarah Hendricks reads the complaint twice. Then she watches all 3 video recordings twice. Then she sits at her desk for 10 minutes staring at nothing. She's been doing this job for 11 years. She knows the difference between an officer making a mistake under pressure and an officer violating someone's rights because he doesn't care about the law. This is the latter. But she also knows the department's history. 3 settled civil rights lawsuits in the past 18 months, a consent decree narrowly avoided 2 years ago after the DOJ threatened pattern and practice investigation, a city council that would rather pay settlements than admit systemic problems. She opens a new case file and assigns it number 2014-IA-048. Then she schedules Markham's interview for the following Monday. Officer Daniel Markham arrives at the Internal Affairs office at 8 in the morning, on time and in uniform. His union representative arrives 30 seconds later, Attorney James Paulson, who has represented 17 officers in IA investigations over the past 5 years. 14 of those officers kept their jobs. Hendricks records the interview. She starts with the standard questions. Badge number, years of service, assignment on the night of March 12th. Markham answers each one with flat precision. Then she gets to the traffic stop. Walk me through your decision to request the passenger exit the vehicle. He matched a description from a bolo earlier that day. What bolo? Markham hesitates, white male, mid-30s, black hoodie. That was the description. Yes, where's the bolo? Dispatch audio should have it. Hendricks makes a note. She already checked the dispatch logs. There was no bolo matching that description on March 12th. There was a bolo for a robbery suspect, black male, early 20s, red jacket, completely different. What made you think the passenger was this white male in a black hoodie? He matched the description. Agent Chen is Asian American. Silent. Officer Markham, Agent Chen is Asian American. The description you just gave me was for a white male. How did he match? Markham's attorney leans forward. My client may have been mistaken about the specific wording of the bolo. That doesn't change his reasonable belief at the time. Hendricks ignores him. What was your reasonable suspicion that the passenger had committed a crime? He refused to identify himself. Passengers aren't required to identify themselves. He was acting suspicious. Hell, he wouldn't talk to me. He kept staring straight ahead. Is silence suspicious behavior? In context, yes. What context? Late at night, isolated area, evasive behavior. Was the driver being evasive? No, just the passenger. Yes, by remaining silent. By refusing lawful commands. Hendricks leans back in her chair. Officer Markham, I've watched the video 6 times. At what point did you have reasonable articulable suspicion that the passenger had committed, was committing, or was about to commit a crime? He was acting suspicious. That's not reasonable suspicion, that's a hunch. Markham's attorney cuts in. Lieutenant, my client responded to what he perceived as a potential threat in a high-risk situation. Whether that perception was ultimately correct is different from whether it was reasonable at the time. It wasn't reasonable, Hendricks says. It wasn't legal, and your client knows it. She shifts her attention back to Markham. Why did you handcuff Agent Chen? He resisted removal from the vehicle. The video shows passive resistance at most. It shows him not assisting your removal, but it doesn't show him fighting you. Passive resistance is still resistance. To what legal order? You didn't have authority to remove him from the vehicle in the first place. Markham doesn't answer. Let me be clear, Hendricks says. You conducted an illegal detention. You used physical force to compel compliance with an illegal order. You handcuffed a federal agent who was exercising his constitutional rights. Do you understand how serious this is? I was doing my job. No, you were violating someone's civil rights. The interview continues for another 40 minutes, but nothing changes. Markham maintains that his actions were justified. His attorney maintains that his client acted in good faith. Hendricks maintains that good faith doesn't override the Fourth Amendment. The interview ends with no resolution. Markham returns to patrol pending investigation. Hendricks begins drafting her findings. Her report is 22 pages. The conclusion is 2 sentences. Officer Markham conducted an unlawful detention of a vehicle passenger without reasonable suspicion. Officer Markham used physical force to effect an arrest without legal justification. Recommendation, termination. The report goes to the chief of police, who reads it and calls Hendricks into his office. I can't fire him. Why not? Union contract, we need a sustained pattern of violations or clear evidence of malicious intent. He detained a federal agent without cause and handcuffed him. I know. Then why can't we fire him? Chief Marcus Williams runs his hand over his face. Because the union will grieve it, will go to arbitration, and the arbitrator will reduce it to a suspension. They always do. Officer made a mistake in judgment, no prior sustained complaints, 11 years of service. He'll get 2 weeks unpaid and mandatory retraining. That's not enough. I know it's not enough. So what are you going to do? Williams is quiet for a moment. I'm going to call the FBI and tell them we're handling this internally. Then I'm going to hope they don't sue us. They're going to sue us. Probably. The final IA disposition is filed on April 3, 2014. Violation of department policy sustained. Officer Markham is suspended for 10 days without pay and required to complete 40 hours of civil rights training. Agent Chen receives a copy of the disposition via email. He reads it once, then forwards it to his attorney with 3 words, file the lawsuit. The deposition takes place on November 6, 2014, in a conference room on the 8th floor of a downtown Atlanta law firm. Present, Officer Daniel Markham, his attorney James Paulson, Agent Victor Chen, Chen's attorney Michelle Torres, a court reporter, and a videographer. The room is cold. Someone always makes deposition rooms too cold, as if the temperature might freeze the truth in place. Torres wastes no time. Officer Markham, you testified in your sworn statement to Internal Affairs that Agent Chen matched a bolo. Do you stand by that testimony? Yes. We've subpoenaed all dispatch logs from March 12th. There's no bolo matching your description. Would you like to revise your answer? Markham glances at his attorney, who nods. I may have been mistaken about the specific date. Were you mistaken or were you lying? Objection, Paulson says, argumentative. I'll rephrase. When you testified under oath that Agent Chen matched a bolo, did you know that was false? I believed it at the time. That wasn't my question. Silence stretches for 3 seconds. The court reporter's fingers hover over her machine. I don't recall, Markham finally says. Torres pulls out a document. This is the dispatch log from March 12, 2014. The only bolo issued that day was for a black male in his early 20s wearing a red jacket. Agent Chen is Asian American, mid-30s, and was wearing a black hoodie. How did he match this description? I may have been thinking of a different bolo. From when? I don't recall the specific date. But you recall that it existed. I believe so. You believe so, but you can't tell me when it was issued or what it said. It was several months ago. Several months before March 12th. Yes. And you remembered this bolo from several months prior on the night of March 12th. Yes. What was the bolo for? I don't recall. What crime was the suspect wanted for? I don't recall. Where was the crime committed? I don't recall. What was the suspect's name? I don't recall. But you're certain this bolo existed? Yes. Torres lets the silence hang. The video camera keeps recording. Every I don't recall will be played for the jury if this goes to trial. Let's move on, Torres says. At what point during the traffic stop did you develop reasonable suspicion that Agent Chen was involved in criminal activity? When he refused to identify himself. Is refusing to identify yourself a crime in Georgia? For passengers, it can indicate involvement in criminal activity. That's not what I asked. Is refusing to identify yourself as a passenger in a vehicle a crime in Georgia? Not directly. What does not directly mean? It's an indicator of other potential criminal activity. What other criminal activity did you suspect Agent Chen of committing? Markham shifts in his seat. I didn't have a specific crime in mind. You didn't have a specific crime in mind, but you detained him anyway. I had reasonable suspicion based on the totality of circumstances. What circumstances? Late at night, isolated area, passenger refusing to comply with commands. What commands? To identify himself, which he had no legal obligation to comply with. I disagree. You disagree with the law. Objection, Paulson says, calls for legal conclusion. Sustained, Torres says, though there's no judge present to sustain anything. She's making a point. Let me try again. Were you aware on March 12, 2014, that passengers have no legal obligation to identify themselves unless an officer has reasonable suspicion of criminal activity? I believed I had reasonable suspicion. Based on what specific articulable facts? His demeanor and behavior. Describe his demeanor. He was unresponsive and evasive. He was silent. Yes. Is silence evasive? In context, yes. What context makes silence evasive? Refusing to answer legitimate questions. What legitimate questions did you ask him before demanding identification? Markham pauses. The bodycam footage is clear. Markham never asked Chen anything except to see his identification. There was no greeting, no questions about where he was going or where he'd been, no opportunity for Chen to be evasive because there were no questions to evade. I don't recall asking him preliminary questions. So you demanded identification without asking any other questions first? Yes. And when he declined to provide identification, you detained him? Yes. Even though he had no legal obligation to provide identification. I believed he did have that obligation. Based on what? My training and experience. Torres pulls out another document. This is the Columbus Police Department Training Manual on Traffic Stops. Section 12 covers passenger identification. May I read the relevant portion? She doesn't wait for an answer. Officers may request identification from vehicle passengers, but cannot compel identification without reasonable articulable suspicion that the passenger has been, is, or will be engaged in criminal activity. Mere presence as a passenger does not constitute reasonable suspicion. She looks up. That's from your department's own training manual. Were you familiar with this policy on March 12th? I may have been. You may have been. I don't recall if I'd reviewed that specific section recently. How long had you been a police officer on March 12th? 11 years. And in 11 years, you were never trained on passenger identification requirements. I was trained, but specific policies can be misremembered in the moment. Did you misremember the policy, or did you ignore it? Objection, Paulson says, calls for speculation. Withdrawn, Torres says, let's talk about what happened after you opened the passenger door. The video shows Agent Chen remaining seated with his hands visible. Would you agree with that characterization? He was refusing to exit the vehicle. I asked if he remained seated with his hands visible. Yes. At that point, you grabbed his left arm, correct? I attempted to remove him from the vehicle by grabbing his arm and pulling. Yes. Did Agent Chen strike you? No. Did he swing at you? No. Did he threaten you verbally? No. Did he reach for any weapon? No. What did he do? He refused to comply with my commands. By remaining sighted. By making himself dead weight. Is dead weight active resistance or passive resistance? It's resistance. But which kind? Passive resistance is still resistance. Does your use of force policy allow physical force for passive resistance? Markham glances at his attorney again. It allows appropriate force to overcome resistance. Define appropriate. Force necessary to gain compliance. Was the force you used necessary? I believed so at the time. Did you consider any alternatives? Such as waiting for backup. I had already called for backup. So why not wait for it? The situation required immediate action. What situation? A man sitting silently in a vehicle. A suspect refusing lawful commands. We've established he wasn't a suspect and the commands weren't lawful, so what situation required immediate action? Markham doesn't answer. Torres pulls out a photograph. This is Agent Chen's left wrist 2 hours after your encounter. Do you see the linear bruising? Yes. Did you cause that bruising? The handcuffs may have caused some marking. May have. Handcuffs can leave marks. These aren't marks, this is bruising in a clear linear pattern showing the cuffs were applied with excessive force. Did you tighten the cuffs beyond necessary restraint? I tightened them to standard departmental protocol. Which is tight enough that the subject cannot slip out, but not so tight that they cut off circulation. Correct. Agent Chen documented loss of sensation in his fingers within 15 minutes of being cuffed. Would you consider that excessive? People often complain about discomfort from handcuffs. I didn't ask if it was common, I asked if cutting off circulation is excessive. If circulation was cut off, that would be excessive. Do you believe circulation was cut off? I have no way of knowing. You were there, you applied the cuffs, you could see his hands. I didn't observe any indication of circulation problems. Did you check? No. Why not? It wasn't necessary at the time. Torres closes the folder. Let me ask you something directly, Officer Markham. Do you believe you violated Agent Chen's constitutional rights on March 12, 2014? Paulson starts to object, but Markham speaks first. No. You don't believe detaining someone without reasonable suspicion violates their rights. I had reasonable suspicion. Based on silence. Based on the totality of circumstances. Name 3 specific articulable facts that gave you reasonable suspicion. Markham counts on his fingers. Late at night, isolated location, evasive behavior. None of those are facts about Agent Chen specifically. Those are general circumstances. What specific facts about Agent Chen gave you reasonable suspicion he was involved in criminal activity? Silence. Officer Markham, what specific facts about Agent Chen, not the time, not the location, not your feelings, what specific facts gave you reasonable suspicion? He matched a bolo. We've established that's false. I believed it at the time. Believing something false doesn't make it reasonable suspicion. I disagree. You disagree that false beliefs can't form the basis of reasonable suspicion. I disagree with your characterization of my thought process. Torres leans forward, then characterize it for me. Walk me through your exact thinking from the moment you saw Agent Chen in the passenger seat to the moment you grabbed his arm. Markham is quiet for a long time. The video camera keeps recording. The court reporter waits. Finally, I thought he looked suspicious. That's all I can say. I thought he looked suspicious and I made a judgment call. Based on what? Based on my training and experience. Your training, which includes a manual that explicitly prohibits what you did. I made a judgment call in the moment. Was it the right call? Another long pause. I don't know. This is the first crack in Markham's testimony. Torres sees it immediately. You don't know if it was the right call. I did what I thought was right at the time. But you don't know if it was actually right. No. Do you think it was wrong? I don't know. Officer Markham, you detained a federal agent without cause, handcuffed him, and caused him physical injury. Was that wrong? Markham looks at his attorney, who gives a slight shake of his head, but Markham doesn't look away. It might have been wrong. The deposition continues for another 2 hours, but nothing more significant emerges. Torres establishes that Markham has been involved in 7 prior traffic stops where passengers were detained. She establishes that Markham received a formal written warning 3 years earlier for an improper vehicle search. She establishes that Markham has attended 4 separate civil rights training sessions since joining the department. When it's over, Paulson approaches Torres in the hallway. My client is willing to consider a settlement. I'm sure he is. What are you looking for? Justice. Come on, Michelle, give me a number. Torres considers 300,000, full admission of wrongdoing, Markham's termination, policy changes department-wide. Paulson laughs. That's not a settlement, that's a wish list. Then we'll see you at trial. She walks away, leaving Paulson standing in the hallway with his client, who suddenly looks very tired. The trial begins on March 2, 2015, exactly 1 week before the 1-year anniversary of the traffic stop. Federal Court, Northern District of Georgia, Judge Margaret Simmons presiding. The jury is selected over 2 days, 8 men, 4 women, 7 white, 3 black, 2 Asian. All have been asked extensively about their views on law enforcement. All have promised they can be impartial. Torres' opening statement is 17 minutes long. She tells the story simply. A federal agent exercised his constitutional rights. A police officer violated those rights. The question for the jury is not whether Agent Chen was polite or cooperative or easy to deal with. The question is whether his rights were violated, and the answer, she promises, will be clear. Paulson's opening is shorter. He portrays Markham as a dedicated officer making split-second decisions in a dangerous profession. He emphasizes the late hour, the isolated location, Chen's refusal to communicate. He asks the jury to put themselves in Markham's position, facing an uncooperative passenger who might be dangerous. The first witness is Agent Chen. Torres takes him through the entire encounter. Chen is calm, precise, professional. When she asks how he felt when Markham grabbed his arm, he says, violated. When she asks why he didn't just show his ID, he says, because I had no legal obligation to do so, and I wanted to know if Officer Markham would respect that. On cross-examination, Paulson tries to rattle him. Weren't you being deliberately difficult? No, I was exercising my rights. You could have avoided this entire situation by cooperating. I was cooperating, I wasn't breaking any laws, I was sitting quietly. But you were refusing to answer Officer Markham's questions. I invoked my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. That's not refusing cooperation, that's exercising a constitutional right. Did you identify yourself as a federal agent? I had no obligation to do so. But if you had, this could have been avoided. Officer Markham had no right to demand identification from me regardless of my employment. My badge doesn't grant me rights that other citizens don't have. Paulson presses harder. Weren't you, as a federal agent, deliberately testing Officer Markham? Chen pauses. This is the question that could undermine everything. If the jury believes Chen was running some kind of sting operation, they might sympathize with Markham. No, Chen says finally. I was a passenger in a vehicle that was pulled over. I exercised my rights because I have them, not because I was testing anyone. But you knew your rights better than the average citizen. I would hope every citizen knows their rights. That's not realistic. Maybe it should be. The exchange plays well for Torres. Chen comes across as principled rather than antagonistic. Marcus Webb testifies next. He's nervous, speaking too quickly, hands fidgeting, but his testimony is damaging to Markham. Did you see Agent Chen do anything aggressive? Torres asks. No, he just sat there. Did he threaten Officer Markham? No. Did he make any sudden movements? No. What did he do? Nothing, that's what was weird. He just sat there totally calm. And what did Officer Markham do? He got angry, like really angry. Chen wasn't doing anything, and that seemed to make it worse. Uncross, Paulson tries to suggest Webb was too focused on his own situation to accurately observe. But Webb is certain. I saw everything. I was standing right there. I was terrified Officer Markham was going to shoot him. This last statement draws an objection which Judge Simmons sustains, but the jury heard it. The most compelling testimony comes from Officer Rodriguez, called as a hostile witness by Torres. When you arrived on scene, what did you observe? Agent Chen partially in the vehicle, handcuffed. Did that seem unusual to you? Yes. Why? He wasn't doing anything, he was just sitting there. What did Officer Markham tell you about the situation? He said the passenger had refused to identify himself and resisted removal from the vehicle. Did you observe any signs of resistance? Rodriguez hesitates. He knows this testimony could damage a fellow officer, but he's under oath. No. When you discovered Agent Chen's FBI credentials, what was your reaction? I was concerned. Why? Because it was clear to me that Officer Markham didn't have reasonable suspicion to detain him. Did you tell Officer Markham that? Yes. What did he say? He said Agent Chen had refused to comply with a lawful order. Did you believe it was a lawful order? No. This testimony is devastating. A fellow officer called by the defense, testifying that Markham violated Chen's rights. The defense calls Markham as their key witness. Paulson walks him through his version of events, emphasizing his 11 years of service, his training, his good intentions. Markham is practiced now, having been through the deposition. He knows what to say. I believed I had reasonable suspicion. I believed my actions were justified. I was doing my job to protect public safety. Then Torres stands for cross-examination. She starts with the Bodycam footage, plays it for the jury on a large screen, makes Markham watch himself grabbing Chen's arm, twisting it, handcuffing him. Is that reasonable force, Officer Markham? It's the force necessary to gain compliance. Compliance with what? My commands. Your unlawful commands. I believed they were lawful. But they weren't, were they? I disagree. Torres pulls out the Columbus Police Department training manual. Your own department's policies disagree with you. Your own training disagrees with you. Your fellow officer testified that you lacked reasonable suspicion. Who's right, Officer Markham, you or everyone else? Markham's jaw tightens. I made a judgment call in a difficult situation. Was it the right call? I thought so at the time. Do you still think so? Long pause. I don't know. Torres lets that sit. You don't know if violating someone's constitutional rights was the right call. I don't know if that's what I did. You don't know if detaining someone without reasonable suspicion violates their rights. I had reasonable suspicion. Based on silence. Based on the totality of circumstances. Torres shifts tactics. Officer Markham, how many traffic stops have you conducted in your career? I don't know the exact number, thousands. And how many of those stops involved passengers? Many. How many passengers have you detained? I don't keep count. Estimate. Dozens, maybe. Of those dozens of detained passengers, how many were actually arrested for crimes? Markham shifts uncomfortably. I don't recall. You don't recall arresting any of them. Some may have been arrested. How many? I don't know. Take a guess. Maybe 5 or 6. So out of dozens of detained passengers, only 5 or 6 were actually criminals. Some may have been released for other reasons. Or they may not have been criminals in the first place, and you detained them without cause. Objection, Paulson calls speculation. Sustained, Judge Simmons says. But the point is made. The jury has heard that Markham regularly detains passengers and rarely finds cause. Torres pulls out one final document. This is a written warning you received in 2011 for conducting an improper vehicle search. Do you remember that? Yes. What was improper about it? I searched a vehicle without consent or probable cause. You violated someone's Fourth Amendment rights. The determination was that I may have. And now, 3 years later, you violated Agent Chen's Fourth Amendment rights. I don't believe I did. But you were wrong before, weren't you, about what the Fourth Amendment allows? I made a mistake in 2011. Are you making the same mistake now? No. How do you know? Markham doesn't answer. Torres lets the silence extend for 5 full seconds. Then she says, no further questions. The trial lasts 6 days. The jury deliberates for 4 hours. They return with a verdict, liable on all counts. Chen is awarded $125,000 in compensatory damages, $25,000 in punitive damages against Markham personally, and $75,000 in attorney's fees. More importantly, they issue findings of fact. Officer Markham did not have reasonable suspicion. Officer Markham violated Agent Chen's Fourth Amendment rights. Officer Markham used excessive force during the detention. Markham sits motionless as the verdict is read. His attorney makes perfunctory statements about appeal, but everyone in the courtroom knows it's over. Chen shakes Tor's hand. He doesn't smile or celebrate. The victory doesn't feel triumphant. It feels like the bare minimum of accountability for something that never should have happened. Outside the courthouse, reporters ask Chen how he feels. Exhausted, he says, and angry that it took a year and a federal trial to establish something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I have rights and they matter. The check arrives 6 weeks after the verdict, $125,000 minus attorney fees and costs. Chen deposits it and immediately writes a check for $100,000 to the ACLU's Legal Defense Fund. He keeps $25,000 for his time, his stress, and the principal. He frames the deposit slip and hangs it in his office next to his FBI credentials, a reminder that rights aren't free, someone always pays. Officer Markham returns to patrol. The department can't fire him because the union contract requires multiple sustained violations for termination. This is his second, the 2011 search violation being the first. He's suspended for 2 weeks without pay, required to complete additional civil rights training, and placed on administrative review for 6 months. The Columbus Police Department issues a press release. The department takes all civil rights allegations seriously and has taken appropriate corrective action. Officer Markham has been retrained and will continue to serve the community. No mention of the $150,000 settlement paid to Chen. No mention of the jury's findings. No admission of wrongdoing beyond appropriate corrective action. Torres reads the press release and considers filing additional motions, but Chen declines. I got what I came for. I proved I was right. That's enough. 3 months after the settlement, the Columbus City Council quietly allocates $50,000 for the police department to develop a new training program on passenger rights. The program is assigned to Sergeant Lawrence Hooks, a 20-year veteran who has been teaching defensive tactics for a decade. Hooks watches the Chen Bodycam footage 12 times. He takes notes. He develops a training module titled Constitutional Policing, Passenger Detention. The module is 4 hours long, includes video analysis, role-playing scenarios, and a written exam. Every officer in the department is required to complete the training within 6 months. The passing score is 80%. Officers who fail must retake it. Officer Markham fails the first time, scores 72%. He passes on the second attempt with exactly 80%. The training becomes the department's new standard. Within a year, passenger detention complaints drop by 40%. The city attorney calls it a success. The city council takes credit. No one mentions Victor Chen. But Chen's lawsuit becomes case law. Torres ensures that. She publishes the verdict, the findings, the Bodycam footage. She gives interviews to police reform advocates, civil liberties organizations, and law schools. The case becomes a teaching tool. Law professors use it in constitutional law classes. Civil rights attorneys cite it in briefs. Police trainers show the Bodycam footage as an example of what not to do. Chen receives emails from people he's never met, people thanking him for standing up, people sharing their own stories of traffic stop violations, people asking for advice on filing complaints. He answers every email, he offers guidance when he can, but mostly he tells them, document everything, record if possible, get a lawyer, don't let them make you forget that you have rights. 6 months after the settlement, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division contacts Chen. They're investigating a pattern of civil rights violations in Columbus. They've reviewed his case file. They want to know if he'll testify if there's a consent decree. Chen agrees immediately. But the investigation stalls. The department hires consultants. They revise policies. They claim progress. The DOJ decides a consent decree isn't necessary if the department is making good faith reforms. Good faith reforms, Torres says bitterly when Chen tells her. That's what they always say right before nothing changes. She's not wrong. 1 year after the Chen settlement, the Columbus Police Department pays 3 more settlements. A woman detained for 20 minutes because she declined a purse search, $38,000. A man handcuffed during a stop for a broken taillight when officers find no warrants or contraband, $42,000. A teenager recorded being told to shut up and stop crying, $55,000 plus mandatory counseling. None make local news, none result in discipline. They're simply paid, filed, and forgotten by everyone except the people who lived through them. An analyst at the DOJ notices the pattern during a routine review. Columbus, population just under 200,000, has paid 4 traffic stop settlements in 2 years. The analyst flags it. The supervisor requests bodycam footage under the preservation clause in Chen's settlement. The footage arrives in Washington on a hard drive containing all 4 cases. A federal civil rights attorney watches all 4 videos in one sitting. Then she writes a memorandum recommending a pattern and practice investigation into Columbus PD. The memo notes that all 4 involve passengers detained without reasonable suspicion. 3 involve physical contact initiated by officers. Multiple cases capture officers acknowledging they lack legal justification before proceeding anyway. The memorandum sits in a queue for 8 months while higher priority investigations take precedence. Then a journalist from the Atlanta newspaper files a Freedom of Information Act request for all civil rights settlements paid by Georgia municipalities over 5 years. Columbus ranks near the top in per capita settlements. The journalist starts making calls. The story runs on page 4 of the Metro section. Small city, big payouts. Columbus police settle multiple civil rights claims. The article quotes Torres extensively. She provides context without naming Chen, explaining that passenger detention cases have become increasingly common as officers use traffic stops as pretexts for investigation. She notes that settlements allow departments to avoid accountability while perpetuating unconstitutional practices. The Columbus city manager insists settlements are cost-effective alternatives to expensive litigation and do not represent admissions of wrongdoing. He emphasizes the department's commitment to constitutional policing and mentions Hooks's training module. He doesn't mention why it was developed. Chen reads the article during his morning commute to the Atlanta FBI field office. He forwards it to Torres with 2 words, "Still happening." She replies with 3, "Always has been." That evening, Chen takes the framed deposit slip off his office wall. He photographs it, uploads it to a secure server, and adds it to a file he's maintained since the original incident. The file contains everything, every document, video, communication. The settlement agreement with its non-disparagement clause carefully highlighted. Legal analysis from 3 civil rights attorneys confirming that factual statements about settled cases don't violate non-disparagement provisions. Chen is building a record, not for another lawsuit, but for something larger. He's documenting a system where constitutional violations are treated as acceptable losses, where insurance pays for rights violations like it pays for slip-and-fall accidents, where officers who break the law face no consequences beyond slightly increased premiums paid by taxpayers who never asked for aggressive enforcement. The file eventually makes its way to congressional staffers working on police reform legislation. It's cited in academic papers about qualified immunity and municipal liability. It's used in FBI Academy training materials to teach new agents about civil rights enforcement. But most importantly, it exists as proof that one person refused to accept that violations are simply the cost of doing business. Marcus Webb, the driver who witnessed the entire encounter, never receives compensation. He wasn't grabbed. He wasn't detained beyond necessary time. He suffered no tangible injury beyond 30 minutes of fear and confusion. The law doesn't recognize witnesses to violations as victims deserving remedy. Webb goes on teaching elementary school students about civics and the Constitution, knowing that the rules he teaches aren't always the rules that apply. 3 years after the settlement, on a Tuesday evening in March, Officer Markham conducts a traffic stop on Highway 73. Actual turn signal violation. Cooperative driver. There's a passenger. Markham requests license and registration from the driver, never acknowledges the passenger exists, writes a warning, returns documents, ends the encounter in 4 minutes. As he walks back to his patrol car, the passenger rolls down his window. "Excuse me, officer." Markham freezes mid-step. His hand instinctively moves toward his weapon before he catches himself and forces it back. The passenger holds up a cell phone. "Your bodycam light is off, just thought you should know." Markham checks the camera on his chest. The indicator light is dark. Battery died sometime in the past hour. He nods once, "Thank you." He continues to his vehicle, sits behind the wheel for a long moment before reaching for his radio to report the equipment failure. Later that night, he notes the traffic stop, the warning issued, the bodycam malfunction. He doesn't mention the passenger who pointed out the dead camera, doesn't mention the brief moment of panic when he thought he might be repeating history. Doesn't mention that he's begun to understand what accountability actually means. Case file 2417, traffic stop on Highway 73, $125,000 settlement, 0 admissions of wrongdoing, 0 policy changes, except 1 training module that officers complete and forget. The system worked exactly as designed. Constitutional violations occurred, evidence was preserved, a lawsuit was filed, money changed hands, everyone returned to their previous positions. Across America, traffic stops continue under the same policies, the same training, the same willingness to treat rights as suggestions rather than rules. The highway remains, the blue lights keep flashing, and somewhere tonight, another passenger is deciding whether to hand over ID they don't have to provide. Whether compliance or rights matter more when the choice could turn deadly.